broadcasting to the world from www.israelitenation.com.
Good evening, and this is Donna Parker, and I want to welcome you all to Friday Night Live. If you have questions about tonight's broadcast or previous broadcasts in general, please email us at atlanta@israelitenation.com. We recommend that you send a biblical reference to go along with your question, and you may also listen to previous shows by visiting us at israelitenation.com. For our Facebook friends, you may contact us on Facebook by typing Israelite Broadcasting Network.
All right, thank you very much, and welcome again to Friday Night Live. And I just kind of want to talk about your week. Really start off with the weekend. We had a fabulous weekend.
Yes, we did.
Spent it with some brethren in North Carolina, and it was just so wonderful, so beautiful to see that brethren understand the purpose of cycle feasts and the dedication that they must make to the God of Israel.
Right. I always love the opportunities to come together with brethren and celebrate our culture. Because there was a time I didn't know what my culture was.
Right, exactly.
And it's so interesting because even at work this week there was a conversation that came up a little bit about Eastern culture, and it talked, we had a group of co-workers, and we were talking about arranged marriages. And my manager, who happens to be Chinese, mentioned that was part of her culture. And there was a time when people would talk about their culture and I really had nothing to say.
Right.
But now it's totally different, and I so much appreciate this Israelite culture that we have, and even with today's presentation, we'll talk a little bit about that.
Very, very much so. I think that's a very good point. There was a time when we would come together, and we might be meeting for the 4th of July. Like you said, we had no culture. Our culture was what was shoved down our throats.
Exactly.
And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with the 4th of July, Independence Day, but what were our forefathers doing on that day? And how does that reflect who I am? How, what message are we sending to our children?
Right.
So it's good. It gives me great confidence to know that we have a culture that it's vibrant, and that I take my son to the movies to see the Avengers, even Snow White, took him to see that, and you could see how they are still trying to take from this culture. There's references made from our book, and it's always being I see that so constantly. It's like a recurring theme where people are trying to take from this book. There's something to be said about this book.
Right.
So
And I can definitely appreciate our culture because everything that the God of Israel commands us to do culturally, there's so much meaning and purpose behind it. You know what I'm saying?
That's extra.
Even the fullness, there's so much fullness to it, and thinking about, as you mentioned, celebrating our cycle feasts, major milestones in our lives. You can see how we develop every so many years, and how those milestones have to be appreciated, and also just giving back to the Creator, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the appreciation for what He's done for us in our lives. So it's so much purpose behind the cultural aspects of Israel that I certainly appreciate.
That's absolutely. That's a wonderful point. And it kind of ties in with tonight's lesson, which we're going to talk about. Tonight's lesson deals with the new moon. The new moon. I was out with my kids. I was coming back from Chuck E. Cheese, of all places. It's a place, for those of you who don't know, it's a place for kids where they can play games and enjoy their fun. And, I was riding back. It was late. We were out late, so I was riding back. My daughter said to me, "Dad, the moon is following us." She looked out the window and noticed that the moon was there and that it was following us. And I thought about a lot of things. One of the things I thought about was Joshua when he commanded the sun and moon to stand still on Israel's behalf. But I also thought about the new moon. And I thought about the moon itself and its significance. And I thought, this would be a great lesson to talk about the new moon and the significance of it. And so this has brought forth this lesson tonight. I also begin to reflect on, a lot of things. But mainly how the new moon was given to Israel. So I began to entertain the idea that the new moon is also made for man, like the Sabbath was made for man. Right. So I kind of wanted to talk about, first of all, the purpose of the moon. I wanted to look at that.
Okay.
And you don't have to turn here, but Psalms 104, when you have time, Psalms 104:19 tells us that He, meaning the God of Israel, appointed the moon for seasons. So we should think of the moon as our calendar, which lets us know when to start something or end something. Well, really when to start something new.
And just to interject a little bit, you had mentioned that how they always steal from us, and we can see how the word month would have come from moon.
Exactly.
So that's
Yes.
just another example of that.
That's a very good point. Month. The word month comes from moon, and every new month is a new moon. But also, it helps us to remember important dates relevant to our King, the God of Israel, such as his holy days, his feast days, his convocations, and his Sabbaths. So the new moon is this wonderful timepiece. It's this clock in the sky, if you will,
Exactly.
that lets us know when important events that are relevant to our Father and to us.
Right. Things that we can do in our lives.
Exactly.
To the new moon.
So in many respects, the phases of the moon, particularly the new moon, lets us know our Father's office hours. It tells us when he will be most inclined to hear our prayers, our sacrifices, and our offerings. Just think about that now. I want you to meditate a little bit on that. It tells us when our Father's office hours are. Okay? It tells when the gates of the kingdom are going to be open. Now, this is not to say that you can't pray or make sacrifices or offerings or anything of that nature on any other day other than the new moon. But I would say that your prayers, your sacrifices, and your offerings are going to have a greater impact during the new moon, Sabbath, and holy days. To me, it's almost like an interview. You can have a phone interview, and you can have a face-to-face interview. To me, in my judgment, I think a face-to-face interview is going to be that much more effective, because you get to see the compassion, the passion in a person in a face-to-face interview. You know, a phone interview might go along good, but you might find out, this job that requires a lot of contact with individuals, the person that you hired over the phone has a hygiene problem. Yeah, it's a hygiene problem. So
I don't know about that, but I know personally for me, I'm a big reader of people's body language, facial expressions.
Exactly.
So for me, a person one-on-one in-person interview, I can perform a little bit better because I can read what they're valuing and my feedback and what I need to move quickly along on.
Now, all I'm saying is is that the new moon is much more effective, and I'm using the analogy of a phone interview as opposed to a face-to-face.
Right.
So, it's very important that we know when the gates are open, when the office hours are open, so that we can come and, offer up our sacrifices and
it's
prayers.
almost like that request that you make on the new moon and Sabbath when the gates are on. There's a direct connect as opposed to what do you take a flight?
Indirect.
Yeah, indirect, or you might need another messenger to get it there.
So
we always like flights that have a direct connect as opposed to ones that you have to stop and
delay.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Gotcha. So you're right. It's a direct line of communication that we have on these appointed times and appointed season. Now, there are many other purposes of the new moon, perhaps more than we can comprehend. So what I want to do now is to kind of look at some interesting facts about the moon. Okay? And I mean, this is a topic that could go on. I mean, seriously, we could talk about the moon and its effects and its benefits and relevance for years. We could talk about this for ages because there's so much to learn about the moon. So some interesting facts about the new moon. One, we look at tidal effects. Tides, in other words, high tide, low tides. We know that the moon affects the tides on Earth. The tide cleanses the ocean shores and helps keep the ocean currents circulating, preventing the ocean from stagnating. Tides are also used to generate electricity. When the moon is new, the gravitational pull on the Earth by the moon and sun are combined, so it's much more stronger. Earth, water, and air are pulled during this phase.
wow, very interesting.
We look at the new moon or the moon on the effects it has on human behavior. It is widespread belief that the moon affects human behavior. The human body, when we look at the human body is made up roughly 80% of water. And so, we just talked about how the tide has an effect on water. So can you imagine the effect it's going to have on the human body?
Right.
So that's something that we should kind of think about. I also in my research, learned that the brain is composed of 75% water. The moon affects all matter of the earth, especially liquids such as water and blood. It is said that a full moon increases blood flow to the brain, causing people to become out of control. So thus we can kind of link while you have this wild behavior, if you will, during the full moon. And as an educator, I've always wondered about behavior during the time of the full moon. We have what's known as ISS, which is called in-school suspension. And I was wondering, I never really got the chance to really investigate it, but I was always wondering whether or not the ISS room is much more crowded during this time, the full moon, as opposed to the new moon. And
That would be interesting.
It is
But,
interesting.
I mean, it's certainly something to think about because, as you stated, if the moon has effect on the physical environment of the waters, why wouldn't it on human when we're mostly made up of water? So
Exactly.
that's a very, very interesting.
So when you look at the earth and how the earth is composed 75% water, it's this, we are from the earth and we are composed in that same manner.
Right.
When you look how powerful oceans are, and at this time of the new moon, how powerful the effects of the gravitational pull have on it. It's not far-fetched to think of these
It's
things.
not, and when you say that, I just automatically think, our God is amazing. He's very clever, but there is a basic format to His creation.
Right.
When He does things, you'll see a pattern over and over again
Right.
in how things are made, from the creation of the earth to the creation of the human body. So that's
Absolutely, a very good point. Just to continue to go on, farmers used, the Farmer's Almanac, they used the new moon to know when to plant certain crops. And if you ask me, I'm going to say they got this from Israelites, from us, because we were an agricultural people,
yes,
so that we understood the importance and the impact of the phases of the moon.
right, and that same agriculture is what built this United States of America.
Right, exactly. You're so much right. That's a very good point. When you look at the health, repercussions of the moon, there is correlations of seizures in epileptic and non-epileptic people during the period of the full moon. There are relationships between the phases of the moon and fertility. According to some traditions, prior to modern technology, some surgeons would refuse to operate on the full moon because of the increased risk of death of a patient through blood
Wow.
loss.
Wow, interesting.
Some say that the full moon may have influenced the voter behavior in the U.S. 2000 election. Of course, that was the famous election where I think George Bush won. And it was controversial. I believe Al Gore won the popular vote, but George
Right.
Bush won the electoral
That's right.
vote, and it was so controversial. But
Right.
it's time. It's when you look at events in history, it's interesting when you look at the moon. It is said that the moon releases neurochemicals into the bloodstream during that time, affecting our moods and our emotions. Less heart attack occurs during the time of the new moon, whereas more heart attacks occur during the time of the full moon.
Wow.
And it's so interesting to me too is that we're a culture that's so in tune with what happens during the full moon. Maybe because it's revealed, it's there, you can see it, as opposed to the new moon.
Or it could just be the type of energy that happens around that time is more magnetic to those who are not of Israel.
Yeah,
So
that's a good point. That's another good point. It's a very good point. When we look at the crime rates, statistically, crime rates are higher during the full moon. Murder, arson, stealing, and even bad driving rise on the full moon. There's a correlation between homicides and suicides in the full moon. Police in Toledo, Ohio claim that crime rises by 5% on nights with the full moon. In the UK, a survey has found that car accidents rise by up to 50% during the full moons. In January 2008, New Zealand's Justice Minister Annette King suggested that a spate of stabbings in the country could have been caused by the lunar cycle.
She actually said that?
That's his word. You can look it up. You can look it up for yourself. I'm not making this thing up. When you look at the word lunacy, the word lunacy comes from the word luna, which means moon. Lunacy means crazy or insane. So you kind of can,
See the correlation.
correlation
there.
of the
Lunar,
behavior and lunacy, people acting weird during time of the full moon. I also think it's during the time of heat, because we know how Israelites at least can be during that time.
When it's hot.
When it's hot.
When it's hot and the full moon, Jacob could really have some problems
I
there.
know. Tell me about it. If we look at 18th century England, a murderer. Now get this. In 18th century England, a murderer could plead lunacy. He could plead insanity, if you will, if he or she committed the murder on the full moon.
Wow.
You know, those are some interesting things that I've learned in regards to the moon and how it relates to our behavior. We look at the spiritual repercussions as Israelites, of course. We believe that the new moon is a power day. It's a day that can be used to change or improve your life. It's a time to sow seeds, which can be later reaped for favorable results. It is also believed that during the time of the new moon, spiritual activity is heightened, as well as the full moon. We know this. We also know without a shadow of a doubt that the Egyptians were defeated at the height of their spirituality, which was the full moon.
Right.
And of course, it all got started on the new moon for Israelites, keeping the new moon. So these are just some interesting facts that I wanted to bring out regarding the new moon. There is a natural upsurge of energy during the time of the new moon. And you know, Donna, there are philosophies, believe it or not, who wait until they actually see the crescent of the moon to observe the new moon. And on nights and days when it's cloudy, they use planes and helicopters to fly above the clouds so that they can see the moon. And then once they see it, they observe it. But guess what? By the time they have seen it, the moon has passed. So it's really kind of ridiculous. The office hours, the gates are closed during the time in which you can see it. You know, even my 8-year-old son can tell you that the time of the new moon, you can't see. You can't see the moon at the new moon. I know there are philosophies such as Islam and the quote-unquote Jewish religion and Hebrew Israelites, just to name a few, all wait until they see the moon before they attempt to observe it. This is, pardon the pun, to me, lunacy.
I agree. I agree.
You don't have to wait to see the moon. But it reminds me of the time when the Gentiles captured Jerusalem, you know, and they went in to the temple and they were looking for statues of gods, and they couldn't find it. They couldn't fathom, they couldn't comprehend in their head that the God in which we worship is a God in which we could not see.
Right.
You know, no man sees the face of God and live. So they couldn't comprehend that. They have to see. It also reminds me of how physical the world can tend to be regarding spiritual matters.
Yes.
So they are obsessed with the physical. So what we're going to do, though, is we're going to take a look in the scriptures, beginning at the first book of Samuel. We're going to look at chapter 20. We're going to read verses 1 to 5. And we're looking basically at Samuel to verify or to confirm that you don't have to see the moon to begin to observe the new moon. The new moon comes at a certain time, and we understood that time being a spiritual people, being an agricultural people.
All right. 1 Samuel chapter 20, verses 1 through 5. And David fled from Noath in Ramah, and came and said before Jonathan, What have I done? What is mine iniquity? And what is my sin before thy father, that he seeketh my life?
So Saul, which is Jonathan's father, is the king of Israel. And he's envious of David because the people have shown more love for David now. This, of course, was done by design, the God of Israel. So David has the new swag, I guess you could say. So he's the man that's coming in, and Saul is not liking this, so he is sought in his heart to kill David. And so David, who was real good friends with Jonathan, are kind of talking about this matter now.
Right. Verse 2. And he said unto him, God forbid, thou shalt not die. Behold, my father will do nothing either great or small, but that he will show it me. And why should my father hide this thing from me? It is not so.
So David and Jonathan, as I said, were best friends. And Jonathan is assuring David that if Saul desires to kill him, he's going to let it be known to David.
To Jonathan.
Jonathan is going to let it be known to David.
Oh, okay. All right. I see what you're saying. And David sware moreover and said, Thy father certainly knoweth that I have found grace in thine eyes. And he saith, Let not Jonathan know this, lest he be grieved. But truly as the Lord liveth, and as thy soul liveth, there is but a step between me and death. Then said Jonathan unto David, Whatsoever thy soul desireth, I will even do it for thee. And David said unto Jonathan, Behold, tomorrow is the new moon, and I should not fail to sit with the king at meat. but let me go, that I may hide myself in the field until the third day at even.
Now this is such a very, very powerful verse here, verse 5. And David said unto Jonathan, behold, tomorrow is the new moon.
Right.
And I should not fail to sit with the king at meat, but let me go, that I may hide myself in the field until the third day at evening. This is such a powerful verse because it confirms the fact that we don't have to wait to see the new moon to observe it.
That's right.
So all these false religions who have made a mockery of the scriptures because they lack the understanding concerning the new moons and the Sabbath continue to walk in their own counsel and err in their own heart's lusts. We don't have to fly in an airplane, Donna, or a helicopter above the clouds to observe the new moon.
Okay.
Are you kidding me? If there are any people who would know about the new moons, it would be Israel.
Right.
Why? Because we are the people of the book. And here it's very, very clear. Tomorrow, how? How is it that David knew tomorrow would be the new moon without flying above the clouds? How is it? It's ridiculous.
Yes, I agree. I agree.
Let us turn now to Psalms. The book of Psalms, we're going to look at Psalms 81, and we're going to take our time and read the entire chapter.
All right. Psalm 81, we'll start with verse 1. It says, sing aloud unto God our strength. Make a joyful noise unto the God of Jacob.
Now stop there. It's very important here that we sing in unto our God because we're a spiritual people. You know, I always wondered if the people who claim to be the people in the book who live in that land now, Israel, if those people are the true people, then why did they stop singing?
Right.
You know, what happened to their songs? If you would ask anybody, if you would survey the rest of the world and ask who are the people that sing like no other people can sing, well, I would think that would be the children of slavery.
That's right.
Even when you read the book of Psalms 31, where the Israelites were being marched in captivity by the Babylonians. And Bob Marley made this song, you know, famous, more modernly famous anyways, when they sang, sing us one of your songs of Zion from the rivers of Babylon.
Right.
So these were two black people. One black people talking to another, one black nation talking to another black nation, telling us, because you sung so well, sing us one of your songs of Zion.
Right.
So I always reflect on that. You know, if you are the people, then why don't you sing like you used to? Why are you
Right.
known for your singing?
Right.
Not for chanting, but for your singing.
Right. And we see in the scriptures over and over again how singing is pleasing to our God. So why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you sing?
Singing is the highest form of praise.
Amen. All right. Verse 2. Take a psalm and bring hither the timbrel, the pleasant harp with the psaltery. Blow up the trumpet in the new moon, in the time appointed, on our solemn feast day. For this was a statute for Israel, and a law of the God of Jacob.
You know, really, verse 3 and 4 say it all. You know, blow up the trumpet in the new moon, in the time appointed. By who? Our God.
Right.
On our solemn feast day. For this was a statute for Israel. It wasn't for you if you're not Israel.
Right. So
it was
that
a law.
explains why they're in the clouds looking, because it's not for them. So
Exactly.
it's perfect.
It wasn't for you. That's why you're in the clouds looking. That's why you're waiting 4 and 5 days to see the crescent of the moon. And that's why that crescent has such a significant, such a foundation in your philosophy.
Right.
Because you wait to see that crescent. And I don't even want to get into what that crescent really means or who it represents.
Right.
But I will say you can look in history and see that there was a Roman god, as well as a Greek god, as well as an Egyptian god, who was named Luna. You do the research.
All righty. Verse 5. This he ordained in Joseph for testimony when he went out through the land of Egypt, where I heard a language that I understood not. I removed his shoulder from the burden, his hands were delivered from the pots. Thou callest in trouble, and I delivered thee. I answered thee in the secret place of thunder. I proved thee at the waters of Meribah. Selah. Hear, O my people, and I will testify unto thee, O Israel. If thou wilt hearken unto me, there shall no strange god be in thee, neither shalt thou worship any strange god. I am the Lord thy God, which brought thee out of the land of Egypt. Open thy mouth wide, and I will fill it. But my people would not hearken to my voice, and Israel would none of me. So I gave them up unto their own heart's lust, and they walked in their own counsels. Oh, that my people had hearkened unto me, and Israel had walked in my ways. I should soon have subdued their enemies and turned my hand against their adversaries. The haters of the Lord should have submitted themselves unto him, but their time should have endured forever. He should have fed them also with the finest of the wheat, and with honey out of the rock should I have satisfied thee.
So once again, you see that this is a scripture that's very powerful, that's very relevant to Israelites. We understand the meaning of this, but verse 3 and 4 says it all. But this is so much more in this verse, you know. It's God of Israel telling the Israel, I'm the one who led you out of Egypt by the power and might by my right hand. Hearken unto me, I set the sun and the moon for seasons, so that you would know when my holy days were, when my Sabbaths were, when my new moons. I set it so that you would understand. So you basically have to come as my children to me, so that you could come and worship me, because I'm a jealous God.
Right. And you benefit from that relationship, and when you don't, look what happens.
That's
you
right.
lose that protection.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you lose that guide. You lose that provider of all that you need, because you refuse to walk in his ways.
That's right. It's almost like it's food for the soul that is conducive to your spirituality.
Mm-hmm.
But how did we get so mixed up on the full moon? Why are we so in tune with the full moon and we don't understand? We have no understanding or no comprehension of the new moon. That's something to think about.
I just think it's us again following after others and not embracing what we've been given.
Absolutely. And that's why over and over again the scripture says you shouldn't follow, that we should hearken unto him, that we should serve no other God. Listen, when we think about the word moon, you brought the point up. The word month comes from the word moon. And the new moon or the new month lets us know those special days when the king will open the gates. It lets us know his office hours where we can come in and we can give him praise. So this is important. Also, how you're going to keep the Passover, how you're going to keep the Feast of Tabernacle, how you're going to keep his holy convocations in the Sabbath if you don't know the new moon.
Is, right.
So it kills me. You know, it's you know, when people take our scriptures and they make a mockery of it, and they stand before many and they mislead the people. And they have the audacity to say that, you know, there's no more law. This is old law. And we're going to talk about that as well.
Okay.
I think we're going to take a station break right now.
All right. All right. Good evening once again, and welcome to Friday Night Live. As always, we'd like to encourage our listening audience to continue to send in your emails. If you have questions about previous broadcasts or questions in general, please email us at atlanta@israelitenation.com. We recommend that you send a biblical reference to go along with your question. You may also listen to previous shows by visiting us at israelitenation.com. And for our Facebook friends, you may contact us on Facebook by typing Israelite Broadcasting Network.
All right. Well, thank you and welcome back. If you joined us, we are having a discussion on the new moon and the significance it plays in regards to Israel. We kind of opened up by looking at some interesting facts about the moon, the effects it has on tides or water. And we kind of drew the correlation that, you know, the humans are made up in the same fashion as Earth, meaning that we are roughly 75% water. And when you look at our brains, it's the same. It's 75% water. And when you do the research on the moon and the effects it has on humans, you know that it affects the mind as well as the behavior. So it's not far-fetched to understand that the moon plays a part in the behavior of human beings. We looked at some interesting health facts, how the new moon causes less heart attacks. Less heart attacks occur during the time of the new moon, as opposed to any other phase of the new moon. We also learned that the full moon, there are more heart attacks. We also looked at the crime rates. These are crime rates that police departments have shown, statistically speaking. How murder, arson, stealing, and even bad driving rise on the time of the full moon. So it plays a part.
And you can also, the behavior comes from a source. You know what I'm saying? And as we stated before, people always think so much of the physical, but really think about why are folks behaving a certain way during the new moon as opposed to the full moon. One can't help but to know that there are some forces, energies, or whatever provoking behavior.
Now, that absolutely, and this is what we have, concluded, and we have seen. We also looked at some repercussions, some spiritual repercussions of the new moons. We stated as Israelites how we understood that the moon is sort of a power day for us. It's a powerful day. It's used to change or improve our lives. It's a time to sow seeds, which are later reaped for favorable results. So we looked at all of these very important times during the moon and phases of the moon and how it affects human behavior. And we're looking at the significance of the new moon in terms of an Israelite. And now we're going to turn to the book of Ezekiel. We're going to read Ezekiel 46, verses 1 through 12.
Okay. Ezekiel chapter 46, verses 1 through 12. Thus saith the Lord God, the gate of the inner court that looketh toward the east shall be shut the 6 working days, but on the Sabbath it shall be opened, and in the day of the new moon it shall be opened.
Again, here we talked about our God's office hours, if you will, which is the time the gates are open, the time when it is most acceptable to sow your seeds. Sure, you can try to sow your seeds when you see the moon, but that would be like trying to sow, corn in the wintertime. The ground isn't fertile. Notice who is present at this time. The Prince of Israel and the priests of Israel. It's not the Pharaoh of Egypt and the Pope. Their time is perhaps the full moon. The new moon is the time we as Israelites give our offering. This is the time when our offerings would have a greater effect.
Verse 2. And the prince shall enter by the way of the porch of that gate without, and shall stand by the post of the gate. And the priest shall prepare his burnt offering and his peace offerings, and he shall worship at the threshold of the gate. Then he shall go forth, but the gate shall not be shut until the evening. Likewise, the people of the land shall worship at the door of this gate before the Lord in the Sabbaths and in the new moons.
So who else, again, would be there during this time? The people, meaning the Israelites. Why would you try to worship if the gates are closed? This is like trying to conduct business after business hours. To come after business hours, even before, for that matter, demonstrates that you have no understanding.
Verse 4. And the burnt offering that the prince shall offer unto the Lord in the Sabbath day shall be 6 lambs without blemish, and a ram without blemish.
Now the offering the priest is making is going to be on Israel's behalf. This is the time that we would pray, we'd make our sacrifice and offerings. This would be a feast to the God of Israel. So here it is, the king has summoned a feast, and you say you love him, but you refuse to attend any of his solemn feast days, his new moons or Sabbath. Furthermore, it shows that you are disobedient, that you have made the decision to receive your instructions from another spiritual source. The new moon represents a special opportunity each month for us to draw closer, if you will, to our Father, to give him praise, to tell him how much we appreciate him.
Right, I think, like you said, obedience is the key, because our God, our Father, has created everything, and he has given us instructions that will benefit us based on his creation. So it would behoove us to follow those instructions and get the maximum benefit, as you mentioned earlier.
And that's a very good point, because, when he said, the new moons, I'm sure, Moses didn't know all the benefits that the new moon offered, but it's all about blind obedience,
right.
Following him, with blind obedience, understanding that he is your source. Remember the wilderness, how he had to provide. He had to put you in the wilderness because he had to wean you off Egypt.
Right.
You were so in tune to Egypt, so he'd put you in a place where you could only depend on him, which tells you the stiff neck, if I can use that word, of these Israelites. I got to put you in a place where you can't pick up as much as a rock to try to carve in it to something else. You got to depend on me. And they still had all of this, trials and tribulations in the wilderness.
We are very creative people. Very creative.
Too creative, perhaps.
All right. We're on
verse 5.
Verse 5. And the meat offering shall be an ephah for a ram, and the meat offering for the lambs as he shall be able to give, and an hin of oil to an ephah. And in the day of the new moon it shall be a young bullock without blemish, and 6 lambs and a ram. they shall be without blemish. And he shall prepare a meat offering, an ephah for a bullock, and an ephah for a ram, and for the lambs according as his hand shall attain unto, and an hin of oil to an ephah. And when the prince shall enter, he shall go in by the way of the porch of that gate, and he shall go forth by the way thereof.
Now, people will read verses 5 to 8, and they'll say that this is no more the case because we no longer can afford a chicken, let alone a lamb or a ram or a bullock. So people would say this law is done away with. But I'm going to address this issue in just a minute.
All right. Verse 9. But when the people of the land shall come before the Lord in the solemn feast, he that entereth in by the way of the north gate to worship shall go out by the way of the south gate. And he that entereth by the way of the south gate shall go forth by the way of the north gate. He shall not return by the way of the gate whereby he came in, but shall go forth over against it.
What I want you to understand is that the people are the congregation of Israel, the house of Israel. And notice, all of this is taking place on the new moon. Mm-hmm. You have the prince shows up. You have the priest show up. You have the house of Israel, the people, the congregation of Israel. They're all there. They all understand this appointed time. They would know the precise time of the new moon. Mm-hmm. It was a vital part of their life as an agricultural people and, more importantly, as a spiritual people.
Amen. Verse 10. And the prince in the midst of them, when they go in, shall go in, and when they go forth, shall go forth.
Who is the prince? This prince acts as our mediator or high priest that offers gifts according to the law that some say is no longer.
Verse 11. And in the feast and in the solemnities, the meat offering shall be an ephah to a bullock, and an ephah to a ram, and to the lambs as he is able to give, and an hin of oil to an ephah.
Notice the new moon is a feast unto the king of Israel. It's not a party, it's a sacred, solemn feast day.
Mm-hmm. Now when the prince shall prepare a voluntary burnt offering or peace offerings voluntary unto the Lord, one shall then open him the gate that looketh toward the east, and he shall prepare his burnt offering and his peace offerings, as he did on the Sabbath day. Then he shall go forth, and after his going forth, one shall shut the gate.
So the prince ministers like the high priest, and after he's finished, the gates are closed at evening. So if you're waiting 3 to 4 days later to physically see the new moon, you've missed it. It reminds me, Donna, of the parable of the 10 virgins. You know that parable when 5 came with oil and 5 did not? Mm-hmm. And when the time came for the bridegroom, the 5 unprepared asked the 5 prepared, can we have of your oil? Right. But the 5 who were prepared said, no, unless, the bridegroom come and we have no oil. So when the new moon comes, you have to understand it. But you're not going to understand it unless you're an Israelite. You know? You're not going to be able to understand it unless you're Israel. But now I want to address the foolishness about the new moon being law done away with. I want to talk about that briefly. Okay. We're going to turn to the 2 Chronicles, chapter 2, verses 1 to 4.
All right. 2 Chronicles, chapter 2, verses 1 through 4. And Solomon determined to build an house for the name of the Lord, and an house for his kingdom. And Solomon told out 70,000 men to bear burdens, and 80,000 to hew in the mountain, and 3,600 to oversee them. And Solomon sent to Hiram the king of Tyre, saying, As thou didst deal with David my father, and didst send him cedars to build him an house to dwell therein, even so deal with me. Behold, I build an house to the name of the Lord my God, to dedicate it to him, and to burn before him sweet incense, and for the continual shewbread, and for the burnt offerings morning and evening, on the Sabbaths and on the new moons, and on the solemn feasts of the Lord our God. This is an ordinance for Israel, for ever to Israel.
How long is it?
I'm sorry, I misspoke that last sentence. It's very important. Mm-hmm. This is an ordinance forever to Israel.
So forever. We know that this. I'm going to read this again. Let's take our time. And it says, And Solomon determined to build an house for the name of the Lord, an house for his kingdom. And Solomon was the wisest king on earth. And instead of asking God for riches and land, anything he could ask of God, he asked for wisdom. Mm-hmm. And this got Solomon high marks in terms of the God of Israel. This was high marks because so many people, if you ask anything, the God of Israel, what would you ask? They would probably say, I want that new Countryman, that Mini Cooper Countryman, or I want a new house. But
Right.
Solomon asked for wisdom. So Solomon is no joke. And during the time of Solomon, there was peace, like there was never in the time of Israel. And so that's something to think about. Verse 2, and it says, And Solomon told out 70,000 men to bear burdens, and 80,000 to hew in the mountain, and 3,000 and 6,000 to oversee them. And Solomon sent to Hiram, the king of Tyre, saying, As thou didst deal with David my father, and didst set him cedars to build him an house to dwell therein, even so dwell with me. You got to remember that the best wood that you could get are the cedars of Lebanon. And Solomon wanted the best wood to build for his God, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. So he is basically petitioning the king of Tyre to do to him as he had done to his father David, to deal, fairly with him.
Mm-hmm.
And, he's going to hire men to build this house. But verse 4, here's the key point here. Behold, I build an house to the name of the Lord my God, to dedicate it to him, and to burn before him sweet incense, and for the continual shewbread, and for the burnt offering morning and evening, on the Sabbaths, and on the new moons, and on the solemn feasts of the Lord our God. This is an ordinance forever to Israel. This shows you the character of Solomon. It shows you that he completely understood his purpose as being the wise king. Now, he could have said, which so many Israelites had did in the time that they were fighting, this is all going to be in honor of another God, or this is all going to be in honor of me.
Right.
But he said, this is in honor of my God. But the key word is forever.
Right.
Now, you and I both know, if the lottery commission told you that you hit the jackpot, and as a result, you and your inheritance would receive $50 million every year forever, you would have no problem whatsoever comprehending the meaning of the word. But put it in the scriptures as God's word, and everybody has a problem.
True.
And that's
true.
something to think about.
Yeah.
So what did we learn here? We learned that the new moon was relevant then in Solomon's time.
Mm-hmm.
It was relevant in Ezekiel's time. It was relevant in the days of old as in today's day, as in this day, as in the present day, because it's an ordinance like the
Forever.
Passover, forever. How long is forever? Makes me think of that song. Is it by Outkast? Forever, ever?
Forever, ever.
You can imagine if someone told you want $50 million forever. That's the word you'd be stuck on. Forever,
Right.
ever? But, you put it in the scriptures. You say this is God's holy word and this is his covenant. And everybody say there's no more law.
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing?
It's amazing.
It's-
And I must say that I certainly admire Solomon's dedication to building the house for the God of Israel. It's his zeal and his desire to get the best of the best, for the God of Israel is something to be commended.
And, too, I think, that wouldn't it be nice to know? Wouldn't it be nice for all of us to know, when the time of the new moon was? I think about the average person who works. They have so many personal days off. But wouldn't it be so nice to know that you have these new moon days that you could take to serve your God and worship him?
All right. We're talking about the new moon, and before we get back to tonight's topic, again, I wanted to welcome all those who may have signed on a little bit late to Friday Night Live, and just remind you that you can send in your questions about tonight's broadcast and previous broadcast, or questions in general, to us at atlanta@israelitenation.com.
Thank you very much. So we are looking now at, as Donna said, we're discussing the new moon. We looked at some of the significance of the new moon, how it affects our health, how it affects the behavior of people, how it affects the tides, and how it affects crime and all this behavior and how during the time of the new moon, spirituality is heightened. We looked at some scriptures. We looked at the Psalms 80 and how the new moon was for Israel, and it was a law and a statute for Israel. We looked at how some philosophies wait until they see the new moon to try to observe it, which only confirms who the new moon was given to. And we looked at all of these examples of the new moon, and we are basically stating that the new moon was for Israel, that it was given to us, and that it was given to us to observe during this day. And we looked at this solemn day was given to Israel forever, forever. And we're going to turn to one more scripture here. We're going to look at the book of Colossians.
Okay.
Colossians chapter 2. We're going to read verses 8 through 16.
All right. Colossians chapter 2, verses 8 to 16. Beware lest any man spoil you through philosophy and vain deceit, after the tradition of men, after the rudiments of the world, and not after Christ.
Very important here. So we see people who don't follow the new moon. They may know more about the full moon. They may say that there is no more law. My question is, where did you learn that from? And here is Paul, long after the death of Jesus, speaking to his brethren. He says, beware lest any man spoil you through philosophy and vain deceit. Do you know the difference between philosophy and religion? The difference between philosophy and religion is one is of man, the other is of God. And there is only one religion, because when you really look at the etymology of the word, it means to return back to the law. And since so many people are so sure that there is no more law, then that must mean it really only applies to Israel. So beware, Paul is telling us, lest any man spoil you through philosophy and vain deceit, after the tradition of men, after the rudiments of the world, and not after Christ. You know, so many, I'm not beating up on the Christians, but so many Christians will say that the Bible is a Christian book. But yet, during Easter and Christmas, what are they doing? They're keeping these pagan days. These days are not written in the scriptures. These days are not written anywhere where we should keep as Israelites, as God's people. These are traditions of men.
Right.
These are the rudiments of the world, not after Christ.
Right. Verse 9. For in him dwelleth all the fullness of the Godhead bodily.
In Christ, all the fullness of Godhead bodily. He is our head. He was there in the wilderness. He was there when Jesus, at the baptism of Jesus. He is there this present day for us. Well, he has sent the Holy, he sent the Spirit of truth, the Comforter in his place.
Verse 10. And ye are complete in him, which is the head of all principality and power, in whom also ye are circumcised with the circumcision made without hands, in putting off the body of the sins of the flesh by the circumcision of Christ, buried with him in baptism, wherein also ye are risen with him through the faith of the operation of God, who hath raised him from the dead.
So again, long after the death of Jesus, Paul is still
talking
in reference of the circumcision, still making reference of the baptism. All of these important, that are potent spiritual,
components of Israel.
Spiritual elements or components of Israel that is so vital to who we are as a people.
In this world.
It speaks so much of our history. It speaks so much of our culture. It speaks so much of our heritage. In essence, it is our heritage, our spirituality. Verse 13.
And you being dead in your sins and the uncircumcision of your flesh, hath he quickened together with him, having forgiven you all trespasses, blotting out the handwriting of ordinances that was against us, which was contrary to us, and took it out of the way, nailing it to his cross.
Now, let's go over verse 14. It says, blotting out the handwriting of ordinances that was against us, which was contrary to us, and took it out of the way, nailing it to the cross. Those ordinances in which Paul is speaking of is the ordinances that were written in the book of Deuteronomy 28. Those laws that God would said he would do, those bad things that God would said he would do to us if we should not heed to his word. It's also written in the book of Leviticus. Leviticus 26. You can go back and look at all of those ordinances that was nailed to the cross. Now, can you imagine that? All these bad things are nailed to the cross, and we take the cross and we put it around our neck, and we wonder why we're being oppressed.
Right.
We take all those ordinances, nail it to the cross, and we put it in our home, and we wonder why there's no prosperity. And we wonder why that we are always, at the bottom rung of anything good in this society. But when it comes to anything that is, at the bottom rung, when anything good, good for us in society.
Yeah, we wonder why us? Why do we have to worry about our children walking down the street and
being shot with a hoodie
exactly.
on?
Why?
Know? So all of these things, you can think about. It's something that's really reflecting to think about.
And we are at
15.
Verse 15. And having spoiled principalities and powers, he made a shew of them openly, triumphing over them in it. Let no man therefore judge you in meat or in drink or in respect of any holy day or of the new moon or of the Sabbath days.
This scripture is taken so much out of context because so many people will read that and say, see, you don't have to keep the holy day or the new moons or the Sabbath. But Paul is not saying that. He's saying that let no man judge you. Paul is saying that we as Israelites, we've been through the trenches. We were there when God fought on our behalf in the land of Egypt. We were there when God gave the promise to Abraham, confirmed it with Isaac and Jacob. We were there when he took us by the hand and led us out. And we were in the wilderness and all we could do was depend on him.
Right.
We were there when he gave the laws to Moses. And Moses, gave it to the children of Israel. And he, told us all of these great things that our God would do if we would turn to him. We were there through all of this pain and all the suffering. We were there when Jesus came on the scene, and he suffered on our behalf, having committed no sin at all.
The bottom line is when we read this book, this Holy Bible, it's us, and that should be our confidence. And nobody outside of Israel should be judging us according to this book. It's our book. It's us.
That's right. So this is what Paul is saying. Let no man judge you. In other words, you were there. You were in the trenches.
You are the authority.
You know the history. You were there on the battlefield. You know our history. You know our pain. You know the law, the doctrine. So let no man judge you with respect to the holy days and the new moons and the Sabbath. But Donna, the interesting thing is that here, long after the death of Jesus, Paul is making reference to the new moon, to the Sabbath days, to the holy days.
This same Paul that a lot of folks,
a lot of Christians in particular, love and claim, and you can turn on your television anytime.
Sunday,
You turn it tonight.
You'll see they'll be
Sunday.
talking about Paul.
They live with Paul. They love Paul.
But here's Paul saying,
let no man judge you. He's still making reference to the new moons and the Sabbath days,
which are forever.
Days, So what can we learn from all of this? What can we learn?
There's plenty to learn. I mean, again, as I previously stated, this book is our confidence. This culture that the God of Israel has given us is something that we should embrace, and because it allows us to do so much in our lives from a positive aspect. It would be just crazy to turn away from it, and we see the impact of those who do turn away from it.
Right.
It's our strength. It's all of who we are, and we can't help but to benefit from serving this God, from doing what he has commanded, keeping his new moons and his Sabbath days and all his holy convocations.
The other thing, that's a very good point. Very good point. The other thing we need to remember, too, we keep in mind is that he is the author. He wrote the manual on life. And part of that manual was the new moons and the Sabbath days and so many other things. So we can benefit from this. I reflect on this, as I stated earlier. Wouldn't it be wonderful for our employees to know the significance of the new moon and have a day off?
Amen.
It would be a real, truly holy day so that we can serve our God. If we did that, we would have something like 30 days off a year if you count all the 12
But how
moons.
much more productive you would probably be if you had those days.
That's right, exactly. How much more prosperity that we benefit.
But when our forefathers left Egypt, they left so that they could worship our God. So we find ourselves in that same position. We're rebuilding our nation so that we can, again,
Worship our God. And that's a very good point, because I thank Elder Shadrach and the Israelite Nation Worldwide Ministries, headquartered in Toronto, Canada, because I knew nothing concerning the new moons. I knew nothing concerning, as you stated earlier, my culture, my history. I knew nothing of this and how it benefits. And I can now see the effects it has on my children, how
Right.
enthusiastic they are, how they understand.
Mhm.
And you know, as a teacher, you really know that the ultimate test of understanding is when someone demonstrates, when they
Demonstration.
demonstrate with their deeds, not with so much with their mouth or what they say. So, you know, there is so much that we can learn, and we should take from this very brief lesson on the new moon. There's so many benefits physically as well as spiritually, and what makes me gives me so much joy and gratification is that this is what I would have been doing had I not been a slave. These are the things that we would have been doing. These are the things that we would have practiced. We would have kept dear to us had we not gone in captivity, had we not followed the traditions of men and the rudiments of the world. So, you know, I want to thank you for joining in. If you enjoyed this broadcast, please join us next week at the same time, the same station. Thank you very much.